Finance and Performance Committee meeting for today. I'd like to welcome all attendees to the committee. It's the first meeting for the triennium. I'd like a special welcome for our new Tāngata Whenua representative, that's Jeffrey Broughton. Thank you very much for coming along, and I understand you have some questions already as well, which is great. There are no public forum speakers today. Apologies. We have apologies from Mayor Sophie and from Councillor Fiso. I move that the committee accepts the apologies from Mayor Barker and Councillor Fiso. All those in favour say aye. Against? That was seconded by Deputy Mayor Lucas. Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda. I'm hoping that everybody's happy with the agenda as is. So I move that the committee confirms the agenda without addition or alteration, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lucas. All those in favour? Against? That's moved. I declare that motion carried. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded of the need to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises between your role as an elected representative and any private or other external interest you may have. Are there any updates to the register? Any changes? No? Okay. In that case, I move that the committee notes the elected interest register attached in attachment A and confirms the proposed management plan for elected members' interests. Seconded Deputy Mayor Lucas. All those in favour? Against? No abstentions? Declare that motion carried. Excuse me, just a minute. Just bear with me while I find my paperwork. Attachments. Sorry, I've got a mark. It must still be in my bag. Excuse me. Right, apologies for the delay. The Dunedin City Holdings Limited Group Companies interim reports for the 6 months ended 31st December. Page 12, the interim report for the 6 months. We have Mr. Tim Lone, Chair of DCHL Group, and Peter Hocking, the General Manager of DCHL. Are there any questions of the interim reports? Starting with Councillor Lund.
Just a point of clarification, are we going to just do them all at once, or do we just start with DCHL, then move through each company?
I think we can basically just do them all at once. We don't need to get too precious about whether we do them in a particular order. They are all related, and we have the appropriate people here to answer questions. So
I've got a number of questions, but I won't do them all at once. I think
No, that's absolutely fine, and I'll give some others an opportunity who may have questions arising from your questions answers. So, Councillor Lund.
Okay. If we turn to page 27 of the DCHL statement of comprehensive income, the very end, there's a couple of items there. One is the 5.8 million. This is the interim loss of $5.8 million on what's called cash flow hedging, and there's also nearly 16 million on the carbon credit revaluation. The first question is the cash flow hedging loss, in fact, an interest rate swap hedging loss? It's an actual cash loss.
So it relates to movement in the swap prices. So the in terms of whether it's an actual cash loss, not really. It's just saying, well, the market has moved since those hedges were taken out.
You probably can't get it today, but I'd like to see what that trend of that is over 5 years, and because we've lost over 32 million on the interest rate hedging in 18 months.
We can provide that analysis for you, so that's not an issue. I guess more importantly, we measure the cost of funds, and that the hedging that we put in place contributes to a stable level of cost of funds for us. So that plays a really important part. Unfortunately, the market movements do show some level of volatility from time to time, but what's more important for us is being able to have that stable level of cost of funds for the city and for the group entities, and we measure that cost of funds, and it's performing well.
But it'd be fair to say at 32 million over 18 months, it's not performing as we would have hoped for.
The 32 million doesn't relate to the cost of funds.
Yeah, it's been marked to market, but it's certainly a loss. Okay, turning now to page 49, and this is of the Alpine Energy interim report. It talks about in the statement that there's a potential, there's a collaboration announcement made by Alpine Energy. Now, my first question about this is: was this in the previous statement of intent, or was council informed about this?
So it wasn't in the previous statement of intent. It's an initiative that has come up during the year, and we have provided some information to members of council on it under our no surprises policy. There are no formal commitments made, and there will be no formal commitments made without council approval.
Yes, because it's very relevant, isn't it, that in the interim report you note that the government has been encouraging amalgamation or combining of lines companies. So, this would appear to be a first step in amalgamation, and I'm pleased to hear you say that, Mr. Lone, that nothing will happen without council approval, because as far as I'm concerned, no members of council were aware of this. The first I knew about it was when I read it in the newspaper, and firstly, it talks about efficiencies and gains and shared services. Specifically, what are there? Can you give me one or two examples of what tangible benefits from this collaboration might arise?
So I think you're absolutely right. It comes back to shared services, and where there can be efficiencies by having two entities being able to share services instead of duplicating services. There is a workshop coming up for Aurora Energy on the 13th of April, and we are intending to have details around some of the intended efficiencies available for councillors at that workshop, and an ability to ask more detailed questions of Aurora in that workshop.
I'll leave those there at the minute. Thank you. And just moving into the statement of intent now, page 201. the Aurora has forecast profits of 16 million this year, 42 million next year, and 47 million 2027. And in the dividend policy, it talks about two criteria.
Sorry, I want just. I don't think we're on the statements of intent agenda item at the moment.
Oh, I had suggested that we could get through them collectively, but if you want to do the statements of intent later, we can.
Oh no, that's okay. If you're doing them combined, that's all good. Yep, perfect. Thank you.
I see that in the dividend policy there are two criteria mentioned that we have to maintain our investment grade, that we have to or we should maintain, and one is a thing called the funds from operation to debt. And the other is the debt to EBITDA policy. Now, it seems to me that with you have forecast dividends of I think $9.5 million next year, $13.5 million the following year. But on my calculations, it seems that we could provide dividends of $13.5 million next year, $17 million in 2028. And $20 million in 2029, and still stay within the EBITDA debt limit of 6. So my question, I understand that. Well, firstly, I'll let you answer that.
So, in terms of the dividends and finalisation of those policies, these are the draft statements of intent. We have a workshop as of outlined on the 13th of April, and one of the things we're wanting to do at that workshop is work through the dividend scenarios for Aurora in some detail, and then we will work through finalisation of the dividend policy. We agree that there potentially is some room for movement around the dividends from Aurora, and we have not settled on the key parameters for that at this point in time. So that will be worked through in that workshop.
Thank you. But isn't it the point that this is this draft statement of intent? So now is the opportunity for council to respond back on the statement of intent to say, well, we think we would like this as the starting point.
Sorry, I cut you off there. There is opportunity in this session today to ask questions around the statements of intent. Our intention is to have a workshop on the 15th of April, so that's scheduled, where we can workshop with councillors these statements of intent and discuss scenarios or changes that you might wish. But happy to take questions at this point. There will be the workshop on the 13th of April with Aurora, then the workshop on the 15th of April looking at the statements of intent, and then councillors will then meet without DCHL present to discuss any feedback on the draft statements of intent. So there's plenty of opportunity for input into those statements of intent before they then get finalised in June.
I'll just have one more question at this point. I see one of the limiting factors around the dividend policy, or the note of caution from the board, was that the shareholder equity, their target for Aurora is around 30 to 35%, and for context, last year it was about 26. And obviously the paying out dividends means that cash doesn't go back into the balance sheet to strengthen the equity. Do you have a minimum figure, Mr. Lone, of what you think was reasonable before we can start paying out dividends for equity?
Again, we would look at various scenarios. So yes, there are minimum levels of shareholder equity that we would deem as appropriate, but we wouldn't at this point in time be signalling an absolute minimum. We're keen to work that through and to discuss that also with council.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sims, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lone, Mr. Hocking. So just teasing out the answer that you've just given to Councillor Lund, would it be fair to say that Aurora Energy could pay a $5 million dividend this year without it impacting on its operation?
it is feasible that Aurora could pay a dividend this year. We have agreed with the Board of Aurora that there will be no dividends paid until they're off the customised price path, which happens very shortly. And so in the next financial year, we're intending and planning to have dividends resume from Aurora Energy.
Yeah, I understand your intention. The question is more, look, I think you've got a background here of a council fighting for its life. In my view, if we roll out a 2%, a double-digit rates rise, that's an existential threat to this mayoralty and this council. These are timing issues, and I cannot see, you've got money in the bank, Aurora's got free cash flow. I cannot see any reason why this council wouldn't. So there's no statutory reason why we couldn't actually reverse that previous direction and say we would like a $5 million dividend this year.
I'm not aware of any statutory restriction.
Second question regarding Delta, and I think obviously to be congratulated for an outstanding result from Delta. Profit of 3.8 million compared to 2 million for the same period last year. And in this current environment, that would seem to be an extraordinary result. Is this attributable to a full work, work from Aurora to Delta? Would that be the key reason that's attributed to that turnaround?
No, I don't believe so. I think the financial performance of Delta is something that has been of significant concern to us over a number of years, and we've been working with them around various initiatives that Delta have needed to put in place, particularly around contract management. And so they've done quite an extensive review of their operations over a long period of time, and that's now starting to bear some fruit. So no, it's not specifically as a result of those contracts being awarded, but more a result of good contract management and improved processes within Delta.
Thank you. Turning to Dunedin Railways Limited, there were specific undertakings given by the chair and the CEO of DRL towards the performance of that company, which is impossible for the councillors to assess given the level of information that's been provided. And in particular, I refer to their stated aim that they would get that company to break even net of track maintenance. But we haven't got anywhere near enough information to assess that, and there is no commentary whatsoever about that. What is there precedent for much more detailed financial statements from CCOs to be provided to councillors to allow them to make that, or could we expect that information?
We're very happy to respond to requests from council for further financial information, so happy to provide that.
Would you have any idea now whether that company is breaking even net of track maintenance?
Don't believe it's breaking even net of track maintenance at the moment. Sorry, Peter, I think you had a comment to make.
Yeah, not at this stage. Look, I mean, I think one of the big proof points for DRL is this summer season, once we're through that. So in this first half year, it's relatively quiet because you've got the winter months coming into then the start of the season. So we'll have some proof points coming up. So this full year result will be interesting to see how we're tracking against that strategic plan, working towards that break even, but before track maintenance. In terms of providing more detailed information, look, I think probably, I mean, we've scheduled workshops already with Aurora and also with Dunedin venues. Dunedin Railways could be a good one to put in place. So somewhere in the middle of the year, once we've got a full year result, to provide more detailed information and opportunity for you to ask those sorts of questions about how we're tracking against that strategic plan.
Thank you. And just my last question, Mr. Chair, with your forbearance. I mean, I think we're probably all a bit surprised to see the write-down of the carbon credit value. Is that because of shifting in the secondary market for carbon credits, and second part to that question, if I could ask at the same time, is are we able to gain better value from those carbon credits by offsetting, for instance, the emissions from Green Island, so that we're not going to market for those?
So just in terms of the first part of your question, it is market movements, and so whilst we have an inventory of what we refer to as safe carbon credits that would be available for sale. That inventory will be subject to market movements in the carbon price, and that's what you're seeing, and that can reverse, just depending on how that, and it has in previous years. It just depends on the movement in the carbon price. In terms of offsets across the group, I probably need to come back to you on that question. I can't answer that off the top of my head.
On the same page 71, down the bottom, it's got other comprehensive income for the period. It's got 14.2 million. Shouldn't that have brackets around it and the figure below it adjusted accordingly? If you could just have a look at that. I've got Councillor Chambers, Councillor Hall, and then Councillor Lund. So, Councillor Chambers, if you want to
Well, thank you.
go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a little observation in the area of emphasis and transparency. I was reading through the documents yesterday and I was very impressed by the reports, particularly the DCHL report. Very clear, nice clear coloured graphs and figures. Then I got on to the Aurora report and I came to page 58. And the figure on the bottom of page 58, the amounts payable by the company at period end to DCC entities. And it's 579 first half of the year, 559 a similar time last year, and it goes up one tap only to 583 for the whole year. And I thought maybe I should ask about that. But so I moved on, and then I thought, hold the fort, that's $579 million. That line, that's $579 million. That's a huge amount of money. And it took me a bit of going back and forward through the document to realise, oh, that's where all the debt is. That's where all the debt that Aurora owes and has through loans from Dunedin City Treasury is in that figure, in that line. And I felt a bit uncomfortable until I got to page 203 of the agenda. And in page 203 of the agenda, in the statement of intent of Aurora, it's actually explained very nicely with a little table. The relationship between Aurora and the other entities and that thing about debt. So I'm just perhaps asking that in page on that little line in page 16, it perhaps should have a bit more emphasis for the reader that it's so enormous, the figure. If we just said something like, P.S. this includes all of the debt, it wouldn't have caused me such consternation.
Thank you, Councillor. We've taken a note of that. We'll provide a little bit of additional commentary there. And Councillor Van der Vist, to your point earlier, there is an error in the City Forests financial statements there. But in terms of what flows through into the consolidated group, it's correct. But there is an error there, and that will be corrected.
Should the bottom line, instead of reading 10 million, should that read 22 on page 71?
Oh, I'll just go back to that page. Hang on a sec. Yeah, we'll need to rework that with City Forests, but those numbers don't appear to be correct in that table. Yep.
Great. If you could send us an update, just circulate by email would be great. Next up, we've got Councillor Hall.
Just to talk about Aurora, I'm worried about pulling max profit from Aurora and damaging its ability to expand or invest in the current equipment. As we know what happened in the past when we maxed out profit, we need to find a healthy level. And will we have a healthy conversation about what is a good level?
That's certainly our intention. Yep. So we've allowed 2 hours for that workshop on the 13th of April.
And Councillor Lund.
Just responding to Councillor Hall, the Commerce Commission is all over Aurora. They have annual performance summaries, they itemise and they measure every single thing, and so there's no way that we're going to be able to scrimp on our maintenance. We are the most closely scrutinised lines company in New Zealand, so that isn't an issue. I'd like to just refer to Delta. My concern with, I'm pleased as Councillor Sims has raised about the improved result for Delta, but I'm alarmed that it might have come all at the expense of Aurora, because on page 7, just the overview, the Delta overview just talks about a significant amount of work to complete for Aurora. And if we turn to page 119, the related parties work between council entities, it turns out that Aurora do $50 million of work, Delta do $50 million of work for Aurora. So it's my question to Delta is this it's simply time and materials work, or is it actually competitively bid? Because basically, if we're making the other key point is that can profit and loss statements be made for the 3 separate activities in the Delta profit and loss account, that is for power network, for metering and for greenfield services, because then we'll get a good picture of where the money's actually been made. Is it just basically a money go round between the council entities, or are we actually making money, in revenue from doing things like in the Nelson metering or Green Park contracts elsewhere in the South Islands?
So I can assure you that Delta does make good money from other activities. We do receive our profit and loss broken down into business segments, and we review that each month in relation to Delta, and obviously the board do, but we receive that reporting as well at City Holdings level. In terms of the work that Delta does for Aurora, that is competitively tendered, and awarded. So that it's done through a competitive process.
Thank you. So in the future, or in the next workshop, we could have those profit and loss broken down by each activity?
Absolutely. Mr. Hocking's point earlier, we are planning to do workshops for all of the main entities this year. So we've got 6 intended. We can provide a breakdown for you in relation to that for Delta.
Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tēnā kōrua, Mr. Lone, Mr. Hocking. I see through the interim reports, and it's mentioned in the DCHL report, City Forest and Aurora, the impact of the weather event last year in October. And you will be aware that in financial reports for council we now track that, and there's a section that shows us that impact. Clearly it's significant. Is it your intention, and would it be possible to continue to track that and perhaps track that more specifically as we go forward, because this is going to be a recurring issue for us financially?
So are you referring specifically to the October weather event, or weather events in general going forward?
I'm referring to the October one, which is noted, but just asking the question, if it is your intention, could you track those financially going forward, as was done perhaps with a wee bit more detail and perhaps separated out as we do at council?
Yeah, happy to look at how we might enhance that reporting. Our intention is to track that with City Forest, and we're continuing to do that and monitor the impact of that weather event. So yeah, that is certainly our intention, and if there's enhanced reporting that we need to be providing, then happy to do that as well.
And I note that was also mentioned in the Aurora report as well, so it's wherever it has impact. And my second question is around Delta, and yes, it was good to see an improved result from Delta financially, but I note several mentions of staff recruitment and retention. That's my understanding that there's a number of staff perhaps in Delta who are reaching the end of their, reaching retirement. Are there plans, because the work can't be done without the staff to do the work, are there plans going forward to address that issue?
So in terms of that level of detail, we haven't seen specific plans plans from Delta in relation to their recruitment and retention of staff, but that is something that the board will be across. So we've got every confidence from that perspective, and it hasn't been raised as an issue to us.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lucas, you've got a question.
Thank you. My first question is on page 48 regarding Aurora, and it's in the commentary about the successful submission to the Commerce Commission about moving from the customised price plan to the DPP. So I'm just wondering whether you could just expand on that paragraph there, exactly what that means, where it talks about the negative adjustments that were made as part of that. I mean, I'm happy if you want to wait to expand that further at the workshop, but maybe at a high level. The second last bullet point on page 48 it is.
Yes, so when the Commerce Commission first came out with their decision in relation to Aurora on the DPP4, they applied some significant negative adjustments requiring Aurora to find significant efficiencies which Aurora did not believe were they were able to find. They benchmarked themselves against other EDBs, submitted back to the Commerce Commission, and they were successful in being able to get that reversed.
Excellent, thank you. And I know that they were hoping to go on to the DPP, so I mean that's excellent. And just on the next page, following on from Councillor Lunn's commentary or questions about Aurora, I noticed the commentary about the recent independent report and looking at amalgamation. So this comment is this is a kind of a watching brief about where the government may be heading. Is that this kind of giving us notice that there could be issues going forward?
We understand that the government has encouraged EDBs to look at amalgamations and collaboration and efficiencies. So yes, I think from a central government perspective, there is encouragement along those lines. In relation to this, there are no formal decisions made at this point, and they will not be made until we have council approval.
Thank you. If I can move on to City Forests on page 83, and I notice under their performance measures under 5A, there was a significant lost time accident rate there of 12.3 per million hours as opposed to 5.6 the previous year. And I was obviously quite concerned about that. I know it's still less than the target of 15, but it's still a significant increase on the previous year. Is that in part because of the huge wind incident? Was that part of what happened? There was also some lost time?
I don't think that is as a result of the wind event. I'd need to probably get some more detail on that. I don't know.
Yeah, we can get some more detail on that. I mean, I think part of it's a function of those sorts of metrics are well suited to very large industrial employers, and sometimes with a relatively small entity compared to some of those metrics get swung around by relatively few events. But we'll get some more detail.
I was just concerned whether anybody had been injured in the wind event, but I think you'd said at the time, Tim, that Mr. Lone, that the staff had been quickly taken out of the field, but that was all. My last question on the 6 monthly accounts is on page 163 in relation to DVML. And I was quite concerned with the satisfaction rating there for the Hot Wheels Monster Truck event at 66%. I mean, I see the All Blacks at 95%, and, their standard is, greater than 80%. And so I hadn't picked up that there was,
Yeah, look, I don't have specifics, but what I do recall at that time is that I think they had to shift people that were seated in some of the rows closest to the event and move them, and there was quite a wee bit of negative feedback at that point in time on that. But I'm only speaking off the top of my head from what I recall. I could get you specifics on that, but I suspect that's probably what it related to.
I recall that now, thank you. I have other questions on the SOIs, but I can leave those.
Okay, Councillor Hall.
Coming back to the Dunedin Airport passenger numbers, are slightly above last year, but still below budget. Does DCHL see that the temporary shortfall, or is it becoming more a structural issue? And how will the current cancellations affect this, and do we need to adjust the forecasts?
So I don't believe this is a structural issue. I think it still relates to the ongoing issues that Air New Zealand have with their engines and their aircraft, so which has reduced the number of flights coming in. That will change over time as that issue is addressed, but obviously we've got the other issues now occurring as a result of the war in Iran. So in terms of forecasts, we're adjusting those all the time. So we get updated forecasts from Dunedin Airport along with the other subsidiaries each month. And at this point in time, the forecasts have been have not shown any issues of concern, but obviously recent events could start to impact that.
Councillor Lund.
Just turning to city forests, regarding the carbon credits, I see that we've lost 30% of their value in a year. Have gone from 51 million to 35 million. And I know that Councillor Vandervis was pushing to sell those carbon credits earlier. So is it proposed that we might have a review about the outlook for those carbon credits? Because if there's going to be continued deterioration, an exit from those or selling might be a viable option.
So I believe part of the decrease in value will be as a result of the sale of carbon credits. So there was 100,000 unit.
No, this is a market loss. That was accounted for separately. There's $5 million of carbon sales.
Okay, so the movement in price is subject to the market movements, as we discussed earlier. We have asked City Forests to put in place a program of carbon credit sales over time, and that's been in place now for certainly over 12 months, and there were carbon credit sales last year, I think to the tune of 100,000. And I think the plan for this year is 200,000 of unit sales. That will be subject to ensuring we're not at the whim of the market. So we'll be making sure that we're prudent in relation to how those are sold.
Thank you. And the other question I have is the massive revaluation in the land estate. And it's maybe just a coincidence, but it's almost the identical number of 26 million that we faced with our interest rate hedging loss last year. That land revaluation on the accounts at page 80 indicates it's been revalued by over 50% in a year. Has the auditor had anything to say about that, or can you shed any light on this revaluation, please?
So the revaluation is done independently, and externally it is a coincidence in terms of its similarity to any other numbers in the accounts, and the auditor does require that to be done independently. So yes, it can create quite significant movements in the financial statements.
It seems like a massive amount of 50%. It's $26 million. Is this revaluation not done periodically, or where did it come from?
So the revaluation of the forestry land is done annually.
Well, it's simply not credible to say that it went up 50% in a year.
As I say, they are independent valuations that are performed of the forestry land.
Can we ask for a second a revaluation, a peer review of that?
We'll take that offline and come back to you with a response in relation to the revaluation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those answers. Councillor Lund is right. I have for many years tried to get City Forest to look at divesting a chunk of its million carbon credits that it had some time ago, but hindsight is a wonderful thing. I'm more looking forward now. Do you have any indication of what the future value of carbon credits might do? Do you see the current dramatic drop as something that is possibly permanent, given also that there have been a number of major institutions that have withdrawn from the whole carbon credit industry?
I think what would be useful is when we have the City Forests workshop is to get them to talk about the carbon credit market, their outlook for it, and their plans around carbon credit sales. Because I'm certainly not qualified to talk about the outlook for that market, but they are well versed in it, and certainly have some good understanding of the market.
Thank you. I look forward to that. Deputy Mayor Lucas, you had a question.
I was going to ask it later, but it's more in the SOIs, but while we're talking about carbon credits, and I was heartened by your comment, your answer, Mr. Lone, that City Forests are going to look at their sales plan for carbon credits with the fact that the price is relatively low at the moment, and I would be concerned, as you say, we don't want to be giving them away. So that was my question in relation to the statement of intents of, we don't want to necessarily just sell carbon credits just because we said that we were going to. That was really where I was coming to.
So we're keen that they are not speculating in relation to the carbon credits, so that they have a planned program of sale. But to your point, we also don't want them to be selling on a market low either. So there needs to be some science around that.
Councillor Walker, you had a question.
I do have a question, but I'll start with, so I wasn't going to ask this, but it's come up with the last couple of questions. But Mr. Lone, it's fair to say if we knew what the future of carbon credits was, in the same way that predicting the stock market, we'd be in if we had foresight, it would be a wonderful world, wouldn't it? Yes. Okay. So my question, I'm surprised nobody's asked it, but we can't sit here in the context of what's going on in a geopolitical context, and I think Councillor Hall's question slightly touched on that. Business obviously needs certainty. We've moved, I think the oil prices moved from 70 a barrel to 100 a barrel, 105 a barrel, and now predicted 200. And I presume certainly Dial, Delta, City Forest, Aurora, and to a lesser extent Dunedin Railways is very dependent on that price of oil. So if we're looking at over 100% rise, that has a significant impact. Is there any resilience plans within any of our holding companies for that eventuality, or is it just a sort of cross fingers and hope scenario and react to something that is becoming a little bit more predictable, I guess, in terms of that price?
Yeah, look, it will have an impact on a number of the entities. There's no doubt about that, and that will have a financial impact for the group. Having said that, some of the work that we've done with the likes of Delta has been to look at where contracts can be amended on the basis of significant cost increases and so forth, or where there may be a force majeure within a contract or that type of thing. So yes, there is opportunity to adjust based on what's happening geopolitically, but it will have a financial impact on the entities.
And I presume in terms of that sort of resilience looking 5-10 years ahead, it can speak to things like the quicker electrification of the fleet, for example. And would I be right in thinking that in terms of exposure, Dial would be probably the most exposed to prices?
Possibly, but that would be indirectly as a result of the airlines. Yeah.
And the other one would be City Forests with their export shipping. Yeah.
Councillor Gary, you had a question.
Asked and answered.
Next is Mr. Broughton, you had a question.
Tēnā kōrua, thanks for your reports. Just acknowledge the first 6 months performance ahead at a net profit before tax level. Just keen to understand across to end of June, just around from operating profit loss perspective around and total comprehensive income around how you believe we're going to track come 30 June and what some of the key risks and opportunities might be?
Yeah, so that's something that we do track. Obviously, every month I indicated that the companies are updating their forecasts on a monthly basis. So as at the last forecast, we were tracking to be more or less in line with plan. The big adjustment with our forecast has been the impact on city forests of the wind event in October, and so that is impacting negatively on our year-end forecast, but that's offset by some of the performance in the other entities. What we don't have a good handle on yet is what the impact of the latest geopolitical events will be.
Councillor Lund.
If we can turn to the Dunedin Airport interim report at page 167, it talks about how it's under sustainability and planning that there's been a site-wide ground contamination project at the airport that's being progressed for another year. It talks about how soil samples were taken, but it's found that the initial risk assessments were conservative. So the question is, do we even need to do this, and what was the impetus for this project?
We'll come back to you on that one, Councillor Lund.
Similarly, there has been a large-scale solar panel installation at the Dunedin Airport, again under the emissions reduction strategy. If we could find out what the cost of that project was and what the savings are or are forecast to be in the first year.
Thank you for that question. I'm personally interested in the solar project. I was unaware of it. I hadn't read it. Can you tell me when those solar panels went in?
It has been a project that's been ongoing for a little while. Are you? No, we'd probably have to come back to you on that, but it has been in progress for some time and is a successful project for the airport.
Great, thank you very much. Right, we seem to have exhausted questions. So I'd like to move then that the committee notes the Dunedin City Holdings Limited Group Companies interim reports for the 6 months ended 31st December 2025 and notes the Dunedin City Holdings Limited Group half-year report to 31 December 2025, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lucas. Anyone wish to speak to the many issues that we've traversed through questions? Councillor Sims and then Councillor Broughton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and foreshadow I support the motion, but in order to speak to it, I have a great deal of concern about the ability of us to really analyse and make informed decisions as a result of the information that is produced. And that's not intended to be a criticism. It is a very complex business and a very large business, but to illustrate the point, going to page 127, the financial results of Dunedin Railways. So if we look at that, with the information that's provided, it shows Dunedin Railways going from a $1.141 million profit last year to an $810,000 loss in the first 6 months of this year, and that would normally cause alarm. That's the only information we provide that would cause great alarm. But what we do know is that the profit last year wasn't actually a profit, it was a revaluation of impaired assets, which I brought up at the Audit and Risk Committee because I believe it was completely unwise to do that. But that generated this profit. It was a book entry that generated the profit. And we've spoken a lot today about carbon credit revaluations, land revaluations, revaluation of impaired assets. And this causes me a great deal of difficulty because it is impossible on the information that's been provided to actually unpick all of that unless we got a very honest summary of these extraordinary variances throughout there. And it goes to the point that Councillor Chambers made before, that it's a great ask for it to try and get councillors with 300 pages to try and unpick all of that. And I could sit here for hours asking questions that arise from this, that will be perfectly valid answers to, but we can't find them for ourselves. And I think we've got to do some work on a great deal more transparency from these operations, because I get really worried with journals and adjustments and balance sheet movements, because as we know, those can be used to portray a very different picture to the actual financial performance of a company. And it's not a criticism, because it's the way it's done, but I think we would be well served by pushing by whatever mechanism certainly for these variances to have much greater explanation attached to them. Thank you.
I agree with you, Councillor Sims, and I have long suggested, more than suggested, asked for summaries for a lot of council paperwork that we get. The problem with summaries often, though, is that the devil is in the detail. These are very complex matters that we get to deal with. But I agree that if staff were able, and it would be extra work for them, and there would be quite a few decisions to be made regarding what was worthy of being included in the summary and what wasn't, but to get some more overview of how things are actually running. I think if it's possible that DCHL might consider a more comprehensive introduction to a lot of these figures with a summary of the general movements that were going on, then it would be helpful for us. But I do think that we do have good information. The information is all there. The issue of trying to figure out where a lot of these things are tracking when we have tables, which I personally have always had a problem with. I'm not a natural accountant, so reading tables is not second nature for me. I love graphs, because graphs in an instant can give you a really good idea of what the direction of things are going and also some of the historical context. So perhaps if in future we could have some graphs of the way carbon credits have tracked in terms of their value, for instance, and also little notes about what I think is important, and that is when you have a number of international investors and institutions withdrawing from the carbon credit markets, would that not be an indication that it's time to unload, which I believe has been the case in the past. So yeah, the request for summaries definitely noted, and something that if we could have a bit more of, and more pictures rather than words for me, I'd very much appreciate that. But moving on, Mr. Broughton, you had some general comment.
Yeah, thanks. And perhaps I should have asked this earlier, but it's more just a couple of comments and observations. It's just for the Holdings team as well as councillors to consider at your upcoming workshop around the statement of intent. One is around the T2D commitments. I noticed some really strong strategic principle commitments within the council long-term plan, but there's basically nothing within the group holdings. There's a couple of comments, but it doesn't flow through to any performance measures, so it'd be fantastic to see, without overcomplicating it, but a couple of, one or two measures within that. The second comment is, perhaps some naivety coming into the setting, but when I read through the holdings group performance measures and targets, to me, the majority are business as usual for an investment company, and I did find it hard to understand what the focus areas are, so perhaps just to consider what a bit more clarity could look like. And I'll give an example. There's one around seeking synergies, but it was very high level, and perhaps putting some targets around what some cost savings across a group could look like would be helpful to be able to help councillors measure against. Kia ora.
Thank you for that suggestion, Mr. Broughton. When you said one or two measures referencing Titiriti, can you be a bit more specific, and perhaps these might be included in future paperwork?
There's a couple of things to consider within the long-term plan at a council level. There's a target of co-investment opportunities. Also could be across the group when you are considering significant projects, just early engagement with mana whenua, either through at a runanga level or through our commercial companies.
Right, so that's a measure target of co-investment. And was there something else that you wanted included as well?
That's the co-investment opportunities, as well as just early engagement. If you are considering significant capital projects, just engaging with mana whenua to see if there's a potential for some joint investment opportunities.
Thank you very much for those. Has anyone else got anything else they wish to discuss? Councillor Lund.
We own Aurora and we own City Forest to give us money, and Councillor Sims is right that we should be expecting more dividends now. We have not received a dividend since 2017 from Aurora. We have been investing heavily in the network, and it's now at a point where I believe we can make some disbursements at long last, and that we should, and that we need to. We need to be seen to be doing everything to minimise our rate increases, and I believe we can do this without compromising the investment grade criteria around Aurora. We will not be compromising future investment. We simply will not be allowed to by the Commerce Commission. That's really all I want to say, but I'm looking to the DCHL to increase that revenue from Aurora.
Councillor Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you. I would like to congratulate the Board of DCHL on, tracking for the full year, because we obviously rely on DCHL. And appreciate you answering their questions at length and the detail in the report, because I do think the reporting is getting better. But I just want to comment on, as the accountant around the table for Councillor Sims, unfortunately the reporting that the companies must do are they're required under accounting standards that they have to, loss and gains and things like that. And that's why I think it's really important that people look at the cash flow statements, because I often think that that's where we can, we can put those revaluations aside, because and look at actually how the business is tracking. And Councillor Lund's comments about Aurora, I think it's been well echoed around this table. So it's an opportunity when we come to the workshop to discuss that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all your questions and all for all your comments as well. I think it's been a very productive discussion. You see the motion up on the board there. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? I declare the motion carried. Now, I have included some SOI discussion or allowance for discussion in the previous section, but under 6 we need to go through the draft statements of intent, Dunedin City Holdings Limited Group Companies. This report that we have already had a bit of comment on presents the 26-27 statements of intent and their draft statements for the Dunedin City Holdings Group of Companies. A report from Dunedin City Holdings Limited that discusses the draft statements is in attachment A, hopefully you've read it, and a summary of the changes at attachment B, and the draft statements for each company are presented in attachment C to K. The report sets out the process for reviewing and providing feedback on the draft statements before final statements of intent are delivered to Council on or before the 30th of 2026. So this really is our opportunity to make any comments that we want or ask questions of staff regarding the statements of intent. Could I ask Mr. Lone and Mr. Hocking to come back to the table in case there are some other questions that weren't traversed in the first section, and starting with Councillor Gary.
Thank you, gentlemen. Page 182 in other matters, and it mentions the refreshing of the intern director program, and that it's about to be advertised, I believe. Could you expand on that, please?
So the previous intern program finished in December 2025. We have a period of 6 months as we prepare for the next program, which will kick off on the 1st of July this year and go for 18 months. The last program we had 4 intern directors in our companies. We are expanding that to 6 this time round. And we went through a process of requesting expressions of interest from providers to assist us with the program, and we have elected to go with a different provider this year. So previously we've used Simon Telfer, who assists us very ably in the appointment of directors to the group. We have elected to go with Platinum Recruitment this year, and one of the reasons for that is that they do quite a number of the executive appointments within the city, and so they're well connected to people that might be looking to move into that director space. They showed quite a bit of enthusiasm, and they are also a sponsor of the Institute of Directors, so they're quite well connected in with the Institute of Directors. So we thought it was a good opportunity to move to a different provider and a local provider to assist us with the program. We also looked at the intern director program that's recently been launched in Southland, well, probably up to 18 months ago now, and one of the other boards that I sit on has one of those intern directors on it, and that program did a series of workshops through its implementation phase where they provided training to people that were potentially interested in becoming intern directors, and then used that as part of their selection process. So we did evaluate that, and we got a proposal on putting something similar in place. We decided this time round that we wouldn't go to that extent with the program, but it is something that we might look to do in the future. What we are looking to do as part of the refreshment is have a greater degree of engagement with the chairs through the selection process, so that they're more engaged and aware of the responsibilities they have to the intern directors through that process, and just have slightly more engagement throughout the program to make sure that all of the commitments we're making to these interns are being met.
Well, thank you for your answer. And how my subsequent question would be, how is the call for diversity tracking for as long as I've been in council? It's a question I've asked, and there's certainly been, it's been tracking better. How do you see it tracking, and what will you put in place to ensure that we continue in that quest?
So you're correct, it has been tracking well, and I think from informal conversations we've had, you've talked about lawyers and accountants often being the candidates that are selected. I think in the last round, I don't know if we had any lawyers or accountants, did we, in the last round? No. So, whilst it's not a universal metric of diversity, there were three women interns and 1 male intern, and we were delighted that one of the females was won the Emerging Director of the Year award for the Institute of Directors. So I think it's tracking well. It comes down to people that express an interest and then working through that selection process with them. So we are a little bit dependent on who expresses an interest, but we're very keen to ensure a greater degree of diversity.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Mr. Broughton, you had a question.
Thanks. This probably, again, related, but more a question to the councillors around, it'd be good to get some reporting on the number of directors across the group that are located in Dunedin versus outside of the city, because anecdotally, it feels like a large number of our directors are from outside of Dunedin. I do note that other holdings companies in different regions only are appointing local people, and my personal belief is that you get far better outcome from having directors who live in the communities that they're making decisions that impact.
Thank you for that view. As someone who's been involved in directorships in 18 years now on council, my view is quite different. We had a situation where, especially with Aurora and Delta, having the same group of directors and having a lot of local input into a lot of the major issues that resulted from the activities of Aurora and Delta, that getting outside independent directors has actually dramatically improved a lot of the decisions that I believe have been made, and also it's improved the quality of the reporting back that we get from the Dunedin City Holdings Limited in particular. So I accept that there is value in having local directors, local knowledge, whatever, but that there was very good reason. And if you go back to the Larson report, the Larson report was very specific in suggesting that independent outside directors were, at that stage at least, certainly very, very well flagged as being necessary. Whether that's still the case or not, I'm sure Mr. Lone and Mr. Hocking will take under consideration. But thank you very much for that question. Councillor Lund.
Just following on from that, there was a famous phrase in the Larson report that talked about an excess of collegiality amongst the local directors, which was the impetus for the outside directors, and I agree with Councillor Vandervis. Question to Councillor Lone is, how many intern directors with an engineering background or qualification have we taken on, or do we have any last time, and do we have any this time?
So the intern directors, we're just about to start the process for recruitment. So we'll do advertising in April, and then we'll look to shortlist and move through that selection process in May. So can't comment in relation to the next lot. In terms of the last selection of intern directors, I just off the top of my head don't know that we had any from an engineering background.
No, one from a construction and quantity surveying background. The others had backgrounds in consulting, marketing and general management.
It'd be great if that was a priority to have some engineers, given our prime asset as our as an engineering based company.
Councillor Sims.
Thank you, Chair. One thing that struck me about the statements of intent was that they seem to lack very direct financial goals, I guess. Is that not a role of council to say, this is what we expect the financial performance of this company to be, and this is the dividend that we expect? And looking at the dividend policy of Aurora, my immediate concern would then come back to the fact that those figures can be moved around from a bookkeeping point of view to either pay a dividend or avoid paying a dividend. And it struck me that that the council might be well served by saying we expect the dividend from Aurora Energy of no less than $5 million a year, that you then factor that into your thinking, and away we go. Is there a reason for that?
The intent is that the financial forecasts are shown within the statements of intent, and they provide the target for those entities that flows through to the plans that are in place for those entities for the coming year, and that's what we measure them against. So obviously at a statement of intent level, the the amount of information is at a higher level, but it still has those financial targets. In terms of the dividends, we work through the dividend policies, but at a more detailed level that translates into actually what dividend will be paid from those entities and is shown over a 3-year period, but is quite important to us for that coming 12 months because that's what we base our commitment to council on as well. And so we do work through at that level, and look, there may be ways in which we could enhance how that's shown, but that is the intent, is to provide specific financial targets and specific dividend payment amounts as well, based on the dividend policies that the companies have disclosed. What we are keen to do is cement more fully the dividend payment policy in relation to Aurora, and in particular the ratios that we use, and we're keen to work through some of those scenarios with council and wanting to do that on that 13 April workshop.
Okay, and if I could have a second question as well, I just around the decision, and Councillor Lund sort of touched on it before, but the decision to form an alliance, if we call it that, with Alpine Energy, looking at the performance of the various EDBs in the South Island, that wouldn't have been my first choice. And there would seem to have been much more obvious choices, such as PowerNet, for instance. Can you talk us through the process that led us to form an alliance with Alpine Energy rather than perhaps some of the more obvious choices?
I think that's probably a question that we could tease out a little bit more with Aurora in a couple of weeks' time, but it does come down to opportunity, and there's not always opportunity with others, and there was an opportunity, as I understand it, with Alpine to work a little bit more closely, which wasn't available with other entities. So, and sometimes it's more difficult when you're in a very competing patch as well to form those alliances, and so I think there was probably opportunity with Alpine that might not have existed with the likes of PowerNet. But look, that's a question that we can certainly tease out with the Aurora chair and management when they present in a couple of weeks.
Just to clarify the point, is it the case that PowerNet is actually quite a strong competitor, especially in some of the new developments in Central Otago?
Correct.
Right. And regarding getting dividends, as you know, it's been dear to my heart for quite a long time, and it's been a long time coming that DCHL agreed to give us an $11 million dividend in addition to the $5.9 million interest payment. Is it appropriate for our SOIs to target individual companies like Aurora and say, you know, we believe they should pay a dividend, or is it more appropriate for us to simply say, we have this billions-dollar investment in our companies and it's down to DVML to provide a dividend from, DCHL to provide a dividend in the most appropriate manner, because you've got a lot of balancing that can be done, subvention payments and stuff between the various companies. So my question really is, should we be looking really at DCHL to be providing more substantial dividends? I believe that, you know, if you look at the value of our companies, 40 million wouldn't be completely beyond the realm, given the investment that we have. But given the constraints that we have and the historical constraints as well, is it DCHL that we need to hit for the dividend, or is it appropriate for us to look at more detailed dividends from individual companies?
So the dividend to council obviously comes from DCHL, but DCHL derives its revenue from the dividends that it receives from the various entities underneath. So it's an interesting question, but ultimately we can't provide a dividend to the city unless we're getting good dividends from the underlying entities. And for that reason, as I've said, we are keen for council to have some visibility of the decision making, in particular with Aurora, as it comes to defining their dividend policy and how that will look going forward, given that we are going from a period where Aurora hasn't been paying dividends to where we are expecting Aurora to pay dividends, and reasonably sizable dividends into the future. So we're keen, in that example, to provide some visibility to council in relation to that, and have some input into the final policy that we put in place. So I think it's a little bit of both. You will get your dividend from DCHL, but I think it's helpful for councillors to have visibility down to that next level as well. Aurora is probably the most significant entity when it comes to that. Looking forward, some of the other entities were very limited in terms of what we can do around influencing their dividends.
It's a year or two ago now that Council decided that they weren't going to reinvest the value of Aurora in a fund, a diverse fund, and that one of the consequences of that would be that Aurora would continue to require a lot of debt, and that it would severely constrain the ability of the companies to deliver dividends. Is that still the case now?
So Aurora will not have a positive cash flow for dividends going forward for some time. So the level of cash flow required to be reinvested into the Aurora network will mean that it will have to borrow in order to pay dividends, and that's why it's important that we work through these various ratios with Aurora in terms of their debt levels, shareholders' equity and so forth, to make sure that we've got prudent ratios in place. Nothing has really changed from what was presented to Council in relation to the proposed sale of Aurora, so it will continue to consume cash, and that will increase the level of debt for the city overall.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the clear answer. Deputy Mayor Lucas, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. I had some questions about Aurora, but they've been asked and answered. My next question is on page 232, and it talks about equity funding for Dunedin Railways continuing for the next 3 years of $2 million, which is not reflected in DRL. They don't show it out for the next 3 years. So I wasn't aware that we were still going to go on right out to June 2029. Is that the intention?
So the intention, as I understand it from the resolution that was passed by Council, is that DCHL would be asked to provide equity funding of $2 million per annum of up to $2 million per annum, and that's for, I think it was for the period of the 9-year plan. However, Council agreed that for 2 years they would allow a reduction in the dividend from DCHL to the city. So that reduction in the dividend was only for a 2-year period, but the requirement on DCHL to provide funding for track maintenance was for the entire period of the 9-year plan.
That's correct. I got myself muddled up on that, so no, thank you for that. That explains it, but also it's not. You might want to look at the DRL statement of intent, because it's not reflected out in 3 years. I think it's only.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a discussion about that at the DCHL board table. There is asymmetry in that. Under the current forecast, DRL doesn't think they need it, but from a which would be great if they can deliver that, and that's the big focus of the strategic plan. But for reasons of prudence in the DCHL planning, we've included, and in terms of reflecting our commitment back to you, the council, we've included $2 million in each of those 3 years of the statement of intent.
Thank you. That helps to explain that. If I can move on to Delta, please, on page 247, and they've got a great objective there about supporting community recreation and visitor experience, and they specifically talk about Dunedin City. But if you go back earlier and they talk about where they have their depots, and they talk about having them in Nelson, Rangiora, Christchurch, Cromwell, Alexandra, Wanaka, Queenstown and Auckland, as well as Dunedin, they don't have any reflection in any of their measures to any, the work in other places. So, I mean, we want them to not only do a fantastic job here in Dunedin, but there's no reflection, obviously, that they significantly contribute in other cities. I'm just wondering whether that's just a more just maybe a comment whether something needs to be looked at in that space.
Maybe if I just talk briefly to that comment, I think that's reflecting the ownership of Delta, and so it's a rather specific objective relating to its ownership by Dunedin City. Yep.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. In previous discussions around statement of intents, I've raised the issue of sponsorship aligning with council's strategic objectives, and it was pleasing to see comment around that in some of the statements of intent. It doesn't appear in the Delta one, it just states the value. I was pleased to see in the City Forests one a little bit of detail there and very clear alignment. But are we able to have some consistency through the companies on that? I mean, long gone are the days when, you know, it's supporting rugby or whatever people's, you know, passions are. And that's really why we put it in there, to say it needs to align with council's strategic objectives. And that was very clear in the City Forest. But it'd be good to have that consistency through, if we could. Is that possible, Mr.?
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
I've had a question which I probably should have asked earlier, and it's regarding the additional $7.9 million DCHL debt that is required for the dividend to be paid. How is it proposed that this additional DCHL debt be dealt with over time?
So you're correct, there is an increase in the debt levels for the proposed year FY27, but then in FY28 and FY29 we would see that debt coming back. We have modelled this over a longer period of time within the DCHL board, and there are various scenarios that we can employ, some that see our debt extend for a longer period of time, and some scenarios that see our debt repaid more quickly. We believe that there's we've worked on the basis of a core level of about 20 million, so that's excluding the 112 million of shareholder debt that we have, but DCHL itself, we've accepted a core level of around about 20 million, maybe getting repaid over time, but that is a for want of a better word, a comfortable level. And so, yes, it increases, but we would see it coming back to that 20 million level, I think, by 2030, 2031 type time period.
And is the ending of the customised price path of Aurora, is that going to be able to change their dividend and the ability for the DCHL debt to be dealt with as well?
Yes, it will.
Right, okay. Councillor Lund.
Going back to the Aurora statement and intent at page 203, talks about the commercial value of the shareholders' investment, and it says that the directors is consider that the value of the shareholders' funds to be not less than what's in the statement of financial performance, which is 266 million. Now, the directors can't seriously believe that that's the commercial value of our investment in Aurora at this time.
Correct. We would expect the commercial value of Aurora to be much higher than that.
But it says here, this is the commercial value. So why aren't we putting the commercial value where it says commercial value?
So that the commercial value of Aurora is considered to be commercially sensitive information.
Okay, that's fine. We should state that, but I do think that it is, it does have effects on the overall DCHL statement, the group financial stats. And so, for example, we have got assets on page 25 at 2.27 billion, and the return Our rate of return on our shareholders' funds is 3%. Now, if we actually factored in a more realistic shareholder value, we wouldn't even be getting 1.7% on our shareholders' returns, and so that will inform strategic decisions going forward, and council must be aware of that. So for our workshop, I would like us to have the actual director's consideration of the current commercial value and the commercial value going forward.
So a couple of things. In terms of the financial statements, we're unable to market the value of the subsidiaries for our financial statements. So we have to comply with international financial reporting standards, and that doesn't allow us to market within those financials. Secondly, we do measure the commercial value of the entities, and we do report the rate of return against that commercial value, and we're happy to provide that information.
And if I draw your attention to page 9 of that pack, which is in the quarterly report, this is based on independent valuations of the 4 commercial entities, Aurora, Delta City Forest and Airport, in aggregate. That's reported on page 9.
Right, but my point is that the obvious place to deal with the commercial value is in the statement of intent, and I accept that it is commercially sensitive, but I also want for councillors to know the facts on the ground, so we make decisions going forward that are sensible and prudent about Aurora, going back to Councillor Vandervis's earlier points.
Councillor Sims, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was incredibly pleased to see the last line of the recruitment advertisement for a new Chief Executive Officer for the DCC, and that last line says that the successful candidate will be required to live in Dunedin City.
Sorry, point of order there. Just for clarification, Mr. Chair, we're appointing a Chief Executive Officer. We're not out to find a new. I think you just need to be careful with your language.
The clarification's noted.
Sorry, saying that the Chief Executive Officer will be required to live in Dunedin City. How would you feel about that being added to the statement of intent for each of the CCOs?
As a council, you're entitled to provide feedback on the statements of intent and what should or shouldn't be included in there. However, from a DCHL perspective, we would be opposed to having that included within the statements of intent, because we will be looking for the most appropriate person to be appointed into those senior roles, CEO roles, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they should be living in Dunedin.
Councillor Treadwell.
Tēnā kōrua. Just a quick question on the Delta Statement of Intent. So looking at page 249, it just makes reference to fully comply with environmental and resource consents, and it makes reference specifically to the RMA. Just given the indicated introduction of the environmental and planning bills to replace the RMA, I was wondering if we needed to make reference to that, because they'll probably have it within the 26-27 year.
Yeah, we'll take that and check on the suitability of the wording and whether that needs to be changed.
Awesome, Kamahi, thanks.
Great, that seems to have sorted questions. Opportunity for anyone to comment after I move that the committee notes the draft 2026-27 statements of intent for Dunedin City Holdings Group companies. Seconded Deputy Mayor Lucas. Does anyone wish to make some general comment? Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you, and I'd just like to thank all of the companies for the work that they've put into these statements of intents, and I look forward to the workshop when we can maybe add in some of the commentary that's come around today. I think there's been some good comments, and I take on board Mr. Broughton's comments about some of the things that we could pick up and look at, and some other commentary. And I think it was useful to have these here to discuss today, so that the board of DCHL and other boards can think about where we anything that we might be able to address and pick up on. It's a process that we must do by statute, but it does give us a good opportunity to provide direction for the companies and what's expected of them going forward.
Thank you for that. I would also like to thank DCHL for giving us so much detail and giving us so many direct answers to direct questions that we've had today. When we consider as councillors what a job it is to wade through these piles of papers and reports, also like to acknowledge that the people who actually had to produce these reports, and a lot of them with all sorts of statutory requirements, had quite a job as well, probably quite more of a job than us. So my thanks to you for doing that so well and so comprehensively, and also to have seen over a number of years now the quality, the directness and the clarity of these reports improving. Also the complexity of some of these reports increasing as well, and it would be great if it could be made possible for some summarising to help overcome the issue that we have and being able to focus on the real main issues and not get too caught up in some of the detail which is obviously required from a statutory point of view. So we've got the motion up on the board. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? No abstentions. I declare the motion carried. Thank you very much for very comprehensive questions and debate so far. It would be nice now, I think, for us to take what will a 10-minute break do, so that we could reassemble here at 11:15. Please enjoy a cup of tea and the extra knowledge that we now have from our DCHL directors. Yeah. tonight item 7, levels of service. The report provides levels of service for the half-year reporting, covering the period from 1st July to 31st of December. I'm hoping that we can get Janet Fraser and Paul Henderson to answer all and any of the questions that you may have regarding this quite comprehensive report with, I have to say, for the first time, more graphs than I actually wanted to see. So, I know there's no pleasing some people, is there? So, questions, please, of the levels of service report. A lot of detail in there. Councillor Gary.
Tēnā kōrua. I notice on page 16 around the resource consent applications, and it was also somewhere else. I just wonder if resourcing is an issue around that, or is it more around the applications themselves and the how full they are, because we know that that's often a problem, is it not? The applications not being appropriately fulsome in their detail.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So, particularly on page 16, it's referenced in the resource consent applications, and currently we were tracking at 61%. That's as a result of the increase in the development contributions that took place last year, so came live effectively 1 July. That resulted in effectively double the amount of applications that we would normally receive per month in and around May and June. So effectively what it's meant is that the team have outsourced as many consents as they could from July onwards, and obviously it's taken us a while to effectively catch up those numbers. So in terms of your specific question regarding resourcing, under normal circumstances the resourcing is right, but where we have these spikes as a result of things like the development contributions, it does cause, I guess, some issues regarding our ability to process within statutory timeframes.
So I guess more specifically, I was wanting to know, because we were able to foresee that and plan for that, I'm assuming. So was it better to outsource than bring in fixed contract resource for those kind of situations where we can predict? I mean, it was pretty predictable, wasn't it? There was going to be a rush on.
Yeah, I guess that the challenge is trying to get qualified people for such short-term periods. Normally, the backlogs are cleared a little bit quicker than this in this situation, so it might only be 3 or 4 months. And I say we outsourced as much as we could at that point in time. So I do think we'll need to have a think about if Council ultimately decides to increase development contributions in the future, what can we do differently? Because this is not the first time that this has happened. It did happen 3 years ago when, 2-3 years ago, when the DCs were increased at that time as well.
Thank you for your answer.
Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms Fraser, for the as Councillor Bendiver said, the very detailed and graphic presentation. I've just got a few questions. On page 25, with the measure there about the capacity of cemetery land, when we're ahead of our target, do we look at that going forward in terms of our CapEx? Is that if we are significantly ahead, I mean, and if we look at the one for ash interment, we're nearly 10 years and our target's 5, do we then look to slow down our CapEx when we're so far ahead?
I'll get that if I may, through the chair. Yes, we do. We also look at where demand has either slowed or increased, with a number of people prefer to go in different cemeteries. So we look at what capacity we have in an individual cemetery. But yes, we look at the whole picture.
Thank you. That's great. On page 28, and it's interesting, I've got a few questions that I think it's only now that we're looking to report on these measures, because a lot of these measures are new. The one where it's a percentage of DPEG's exhibition galleries that are committed to displays from their collection, and the target's 40%. I think at the time, because that's the galleries, I think what I had thought was like the collection, that we had thought that we were going to have a target about how much of the art gallery's actual collection was in display at one time, but this is the actual space, isn't it? Is that how I'm reading that?
We might need to take that one away and do some further research on that, Councillor. Sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. On page 29, I've got a couple of questions. One is to do with the website. And I hear that we've upgraded the website and that we have historical pages that we keep on there for reference. Are we going to catch up that we've got the new website, that we're going to, we're obviously, I don't even know where we are currently at, to get on track by having at least 30% refreshed?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, because of some recruitment issues recently, we haven't had enough resources, but we have now developed, or in development, a strategy, and the website is one of our priorities to simplify and modernise and make it user-friendly.
Excellent. I think we will all agree that would be great. And my next question is about Lagoima, and I know we have now appointed a special Lagoima officer, but I'm still really surprised that we are still so far behind the target. Is it because there's more Lagoimas, or they're more complex, or does the staff need to get up to speed? I'm just wondering, obviously we want to hit target on Lagoima.
It is a volume issue. We're trying to catch up, but we've got one dedicated FTE.
I know we have a charging policy, and I know we haven't implemented it. Is that going to be something that we're going to have to look at in order to be able to meet our target? Because I know people get grumpy that they don't get responded to.
We have drafted a policy for charging, and that will be in the part of the 10-year plan, in fees and services charges.
On the issue of Lagoima requests, there was an intention some time ago for all Lagoima requests to be put on the DCC website. My question is, has this happened, and are Lagoima requests from councillors treated any differently from general public Lagoima requests in terms of appearing somewhere on the website?
Sorry, I can't answer that, but I can. I'll email you or councillors the answer to that. I don't know.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Lund, you had a question.
Yes, to Mr Henderson, just regarding the earthquake-prone building register at page 34, and I see you're making good progress there, but I've actually, what is the legislation requirements to complete that body of work?
The time frame under the current legislation is by 2032.
So if we wanted, we could ask for council to slow that down.
I guess at the minute we have one dedicated resource for that work. We have programmed that out. We've effectively, we have semi-slowed it at the minute given the potential changes in legislation. But even if the new legislation is passed, the work's still going to happen. And I guess what it might do is then bottleneck, and so we've tried to stagger it, I guess, effectively, and that's why the target goes 30, 40, 50, all the way up to around 2030 at the time.
No, thank you, that's understood, but my concern is that the new legislation for Dunedin, it shortens the time frame because we're medium risk. And so I think building owners would be very, and of course the clock starts ticking on the 25-year period from the point they are classified as earthquake prone, isn't that right?
I'll need to check that, Councillor. My understanding was because we were in the low zone, even though if the legislation was passed moving us into a medium zone, it didn't impact on the time frames, was my understanding, but I will check that and come back to you.
Thank you. I understand, Mr Henderson, that I think the time frame is 25 years. So anyway, that would just be my comment, that I would very much in favour of just possibly having our staff resource reallocated for a period of time on that.
Sorry, through the chair, if I can just comment on that a little bit. The challenge around staggering it was also the capacity of the engineers within the city in terms of their ability to complete the assessments, given the fact that once we issue a request for an assessment to be undertaken, that the building owner only has 12 months with one ability to extend. If the engineers cannot provide the information within the time frame, we automatically have to classify the building as earthquake prone. So that's why we've tried to stagger it as best we can.
Okay, no, thank you for that, Mr. Henderson. Just regarding page 40, cycleways, is that Mr. McLean? I note that we're not on track for that measure, that if I'm reading the graph correctly, that there's a continuing decline year on year. So that average daily number, as at the present time, is around about 108, and it was 120 last year. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Thanks, Councillor. Not quite. So the two darker bars there are the full year result. The lighter turquoise one is the half year. We've had some debate in the team as to exactly how to do this. The target is actually increase year on year, and given that last year was lower than the 23-24 year, technically we can't hand on heart say it's increased year on year. Indications are at this point for the current year being measured, it will be higher than last year. So the target may need to be slightly tweaked because the intent was to improve each year on the previous year. But because we've got one year that is lower than the other, we can't say year on year we've hit that target. So we may bring, as part of the 10-year plan, a slight target wording change to say improves on the previous year.
I understand that, but surely the measure is the number of people using cycleways, the average daily movement. So we're talking about movements per day here, and last year there was 120 movements per day across the network, and at this present point in time there's 108. So we're not increasing year on year. Isn't that how? That's the only way we can read this graph, surely.
Well, the previous 2 years are averaged out for 365 days. This is only averaged out, so I think you'd have to let the remainder of the year play out before you could really compare it.
Okay. So you're saying you believe there might be seasonal variations, and that's what you've seen in previous years?
Yeah, look, we do know there's seasonal variations, and I'm aware of a good many more staff cycling to work because of the current fuel prices. So we, there are things that influence people's mode choice.
Can I make a request on that issue, and that is that we had a very good 4-year graph which showed that cycling levels hadn't increased over the 4 years, but there was some variability within those 4 years. Can we have that graph extended so that we have the full context over a longer time period?
We can certainly incorporate that into a report. This is the levels of service, so it would require an amendment to the levels of service, which could only be done through the 10-year plan. But we could report that graph, because I know the one you're talking about, through a different reporting mechanism through the council. And
just have it updated with the extra years added to it?
I'll talk to the team about getting it updated.
Thank you. Councillor Chambers.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I like this report because it's not just about money, it's about other stuff, and although perhaps everything is about money in the end. But with regard to city properties and community housing on page 22, I just wondered if the report doesn't paint rather too rosy a picture. For example, if you've got a 98% occupancy, that means there's not much capacity. But also the priority about people most in need, looking at priority 1, priority 2, the numbers are tiny. Perhaps if you showed priority 3 as well, it would paint a slightly different picture.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, as Mr McLean said, these levels have been agreed in our 9-year plan. So while we could definitely consider, tweaks, it would have to be part of the 10-year plan process if, say we included a different priority.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd just like to note that a 98% occupancy doesn't necessarily mean there's not much capacity. It just means that the rents are so incredibly cheap that there's a very long queue of people waiting to get into them. But anyway, Councillor Treadwell had a question.
Tēnā koe to the Chair. This is continuing on the page 40 cycleway question from Mr McLean. Actually, thank you for clarifying. I guess we haven't had the full year results, so it sounds like we're looking to exceed the previous year for the 25-26 average daily movements. But I was going to ask, we had sort of an under-delivery on summer, and I wondered if, in your view, that would affect the daily movement numbers.
Sorry, Councillor, can you clarify, did you say under-delivery? What?
Sorry, I was being glib. It was a really rainy summer season, and in your view, do those seasonal variations have much effect?
Yeah, look, we can make assumptions about the under-delivery of summer, but yes, certainly the weather would play a part, I'm sure.
Appreciate that. May I have another question?
Sure.
So this is on, I believe it was page 22, the Community Housing Satisfaction Survey. I was wondering if that accounted for, or if one of the questions within the survey accounted for the rental levels, or if it's purely on the requirements being met irrespective of the rent being charged.
My take on it is it's the latter, but I'll just confer with my colleagues.
Not entirely sure, Councillor, but we can definitely check and come back to you.
Awesome, appreciate that. And may I have a third question?
Of course.
Awesome. Page 45, just looking at drinking water quality standards, and I wondered if we could have some expansion as to why it looks like we've had a bit of a drop in drinking water quality since the previous year.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Treadwell. What you see here is what we've discussed previously. It's more around the assurance that the water is safe to drink. We are genuinely satisfied the water is safe to drink, and that is predicated on the sampling and test, the very rigorous sampling and testing regime we have in place. The assurance is, do you have the evidence to support that? And so, for example, the records have to be kept on a fairly short time frame, like 15 minutes. So if we have information being transferred from remote locations and Wi-Fi drops out, for example, we lose data. So we're putting measures in place to retrieve the information at source and store it at source and then feed it back into the system. So there's a number of communication, data storage, data integrity and data transmission improvements in place. So that's what that's reflected of, less so around the water isn't safe to drink.
Awesome, thanks for that clarification.
Councillor Hall.
On page 53 on the curbside, can you talk to us why we've missed so many curbside collections a month against a target of 80? And what improvements should we expect over the rest of the year? For context, like what has it been in the past? Is this an upwards trend or just an anomaly?
Thanks, Councillor. I would have to get back to you on previous years. This is a new measure, so I'd have to look at how we measured it. This was a deliberate measure put in, I guess, when we developed the measures, we didn't want to have just put in things that were like really easy to achieve. The feedback from the community said we need to do better in places like this. So I thought it really important to daylight it and daylight our performance. So yes, we need to do better, and this gives that transparency, and we're talking to our contractors about that. So there are a range of reasons. Sometimes there's a vehicle breakdown and they just miss. Sometimes it's just straight out missed. Yep.
I know it's too late, but a trend line for that would be great over a larger period.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. We can take that on board again, as Mr McLean's already indicated that this is a new measure, so we'll see what we can do.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks to staff. Laws are definitely the part of our organisation that just keeps giving, and thanks to the work in this over the years, which I've been involved with. And my question again goes back to page 40 in the cycleways, and it's probably for Mr McLean, and probably just maybe an update for new councillors around some of the issues we've had in previous years around the placement and the counters for bikes not working. So that's the first question. And the second one would be, we're wholly dependent on the counters to gather this information, and I've used myself as an example. On Te Aramoana, I know there's one counter which I passed, but other than that, from there to here, I avoid all the other counters. So it doesn't take into account the large number of cyclists that aren't caught up in that capturing mechanism. Two questions.
Yeah, thank you. First one is, yes, any kind of measuring technology that's out in the environment is sometimes prone to not performing as expected. So we've been, upgrading and improving that. And yeah, they're a place and time, and it requires someone to be right where the counter is to be counted. So yes.
Mr. Broughton, you had a question.
Thank you. Not sure who this is directed to, so perhaps you can help me, Councillor Vanderwas. Treaty Partnerships, page 42. I've got a few questions around one of the measure around number of co-investment opportunities are explored and developed. Firstly, what's the logic behind only reporting at year end? I thought that this could have been something that could have been a progress update as a half-yearly report. Just question one. And question two around it is this embedded across your different business units across council? Because I think around investment opportunities, they would potentially sit across property, housing, infrastructure.
Thank you. I'll answer the second question because I know the answer to that one. But yes, it is across council. And it's actually dealt with at a CEO level, so I can't provide any further details. But yeah, it's across council. The first one, sorry, can you repeat the first one?
Just how come we can't provide an update after 6 months?
We potentially can. Yeah, we can look at that.
Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you. My first question goes back to an answer that you gave earlier, Ms Fraser, about looking that, and I just want a clarification that, as I said, these are the first time we're reporting on these new measures. So anything that we think now in hindsight, we could have done better or changed, we'll have that opportunity when we develop the long-term plan. Is that correct?
Yes, if we want to change the performance targets that we have set here, we can review those as part of the 10-year plan process.
Or if we realise we've missed something, and I know Mayor Sophie, one of the things that she realised that she thinks potentially we've missed is like attendance numbers, say at Toitu, the Art Gallery, Lanyuan, things like that. So we can look at that going forward.
Yep, all of those measures could be considered in the 10-year plan.
Thank you. Now I've got two specific ones. One is, and probably Mr Henderson can answer this, on page 32. It's to do with the measure about the percentage of scheduled food control plans verification visits, and obviously we're not going to meet that target. Was that a staffing issue? Why we're obviously so far behind?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. There's multiple reasons behind this, and they gave me a list of about 7 or 8 of reasons as to why. Examples just could simply be that the owner's not ready and cancels it at last minute in terms of things, and so effectively we breach the time frame. I'm certainly not aware of it being a staffing-based question.
That's good. It was more, that was where I was, if it's more of the onus on us that we, no, that's good. Thank you. And on page 43, the last measure about the eyesight visitor feedback, I read what the feedback is continuously collected. I'm just not sure where does that get reported back to council, and how are we keeping that as a, obviously what we want is to know how the eyesight's performing. But now that I look at this, how does this measure actually tell us how the eyesight's performing?
It does seem a bit subjective. Yeah.
So maybe this is another one that we might flag for looking at the LTP. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Asked and answered.
Councillor Chambers.
Yeah, thank you. Just in relation to waste minimisation on page 52, and just an observation about these green bins. We didn't used to have green bins in the olden days. Now I drive down Portobello Road on a Wednesday morning, and everybody's got a green bin, and they're all full to bursting, full of green waste. It just shows you sort of unintended consequences. If you give people a bin, they'll fill it. Can you perhaps talk about that?
Thanks, Councillor, if I may, through the chair. So the green bin is a very deliberate thing. To remove organic material out of landfill is extremely beneficial to our carbon emissions, and a lot of people were putting compostable and green waste in with their rubbish bags back in the olden days. So this is a really deliberate strategy to separate out. And it's a regulated requirement to offer that as well. So we introduced that just purely because of its ability to manage and control some of those emissions.
Yeah, but the main content of these green bins is actually green. It's actually kind of garden waste, I think, certainly in my case. So we're transporting huge volumes of garden waste, which we didn't used to. If you understand?
Yes, a lot of people used to put their garden waste in with the black bags. So this gives people the option now. Some people still choose to compost at home, but this gives people that either don't want to or can't the option to send it to a municipal composting facility.
Councillor Bayhem.
On the topic of green bins, is it true we met our emission targets almost immediately when we started removing the green waste from the landfill?
I would have to check with the Zero Carbon team on when that happened.
They have been very popular though, and getting back to the missed bin collection, I seem to recall that the green bins were so popular in my community that the truck would come and it would be full up and it couldn't collect all of the green bins and it would have to reschedule, and I think that's part of the reason some of the bin collections were being missed. Talking about cycleways, we only are measuring, the counter's only on the commuter places, so it's not measuring the increase in leisure cycling activity, is that right?
I'd have to get back to you on exactly where they're counted, but certainly if they're on for the shared path to Otago, they would count those people out for a leisure ride. Yeah.
I've noticed just in the couple of weeks that the new cycle connection has been open, the extraordinary number of cyclists going past my house in the country, teams and teams of them. It's amazing. So I don't know how we capture that unless we put a counter on the new pieces. On page 26 of our papers, or page 7 of the report, the community libraries a little bit down on open days. Is that a staffing issue?
No, not a staffing issue.
Okay, and this afternoon's not on target. But that's because it's fairly new, so it hasn't met the targets for this year. Yeah, great, thank you.
Councillor Sims.
Thank you, Chair. I see the measure of trying to reduce the amount of fuel and petrol and diesel being used. But I don't see any effort to charge the PHEV vehicles that the council have got on site here. So are we just operating those vehicles as HEVs, or are we charging them?
There is future work planned, Councillor Sims, to address that particular issue. I'll say there's complexities. It's more around what spaces is available and useful to install those facilities. But it's something we're actively working on.
I have a general question, and that is that there are an extraordinary number of new measures here. And one of them that caught my eye was measure the status of the future development strategy required by the National Policy Statement on Urban Development 2020 and FDS Implementation Plan. What would it says this new measures on hold due to resource management reform, but what would be the point of having that as a new measure? And what has there been a council directive to introduce a lot of new measures? What actually drove all these new measures?
So the new measures came around as part of the 9-year plan process when there was a review of the council's levels of service and performance targets. And without being able to answer your specific question on the RMA bit, what I would say is the half-year update has flagged where there are maybe opportunities to reword targets or improve on the targets as part of the 10-year plan. So some of those things have been noted for a review, but the new measures did come about through council's agreement to review the 9-year plan levels of service.
Okay, and also it's some of the questioners have suggested that perhaps a longer number of rather than 3 years might be appropriate for some of these graphs. Is that something that you could incorporate into this format, or would that be a difficulty? Just to give a bit more context over time, for instance.
I think it depends on the measure. Definitely for some of them we could provide more historical data. I think we just landed on 3 to try and give a balance of not like an information overwhelm, but definitely we could provide a bit more historical data if that's wanted.
Fine, okay. Now, have I missed anybody? Was there any other questions? No, we're done with questions then. In that case, I'd like to move from the chair that the committee notes the results of the half-year levels of service reporting, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lucas. The opportunity now for any comment. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and just again, congratulations to staff on getting to this point. It's really appreciated. I can see that in the commentary from people as they spoke today, and obviously when they were reading through this. As I mentioned earlier, I was involved a couple of years back actually, I think it was with Councillor Acklin in the review of the levels of service. And I have to say, what we have now is way more user friendly, and has way more tangible measurement points, which is great to see. And to those new councillors, just be aware. Previously, this was way more difficult to decipher previously, and some of those measurement parameters were, I'll be polite here, were questionable, and sometimes rather abstract, and caused way more debate around the table than they did today. And I think what the debate today proved that this is it's a way better system. And I think going back to the Deputy Mayor's question as well, I'm also take encouragement from the fact that we can potentially look at adding, subtracting, tweaking some of this stuff during the 10-year plan process. And I just want to, I don't want to get bogged down in the cycling debate, because the previous loss also we deferred to 80% of the time was talking about how many bloody cyclists were on the road. But I just think this should never be used as an opportunity to beat down on on people walking, cycling and taking public transport. And whether we like it or not, it is the data shows that year on year this is growing, particularly in the PT space. Public transport.
Point of order. Sorry.
So what's the number of your point of order?
25.2, misrepresentation. Plainly, the claim that you've repeatedly made that the cyclist levels keep increasing has been shown not to be correct by
Sorry,
the
Mr. Chair, shouldn't somebody else rule on your point of order?
I'll get the Deputy Mayor to rule on that.
I'll just take a minute adjournment just to consult on that. Thank you. Go on the actual factual data that we have on the counters. We can't go on any anecdotal.
Yep. Thank you, and I'm happy to withdraw the one on cycling. But I mean, I will talk to the fact that some of the counters were broken last year. But I did actually say public transport was increasing year on year, and walking we don't have stats, but anecdotally we could take a guess on that. But I wanted just to add, in the midst of a geopolitical crisis and what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz related to oil prices and its availability and the consequences to households, I think we should celebrate ourselves as a city that we have the opportunity to walk, bike and take public transport. And I have no doubt that we will see across this city and across the Motu and across the world the uptake in the opportunity to do that. Will be quite significant in the coming months. So we should celebrate the fact that we've had the foresight to invest in infrastructure that allows people to do those alternatives, because certainly places in America don't have that opportunity. So just once again, thanks to staff for their work on this, and if nothing else, I take comfort in the fact that the Chair, Councillor van der Vos, can wallow in the new level of graphs available for him to look at.
The wallowing statement is not one that I think is appropriate, Councillor Walker.
Happy to withdraw.
Thank you. Councillor Walker's point, I think, is
well made. Point of order, disrespect. Point of order, disrespect. I'd like Councillor Walker to withdraw the wallowing statement for the record.
He has done. I think we'll just let that pass. I think Councillor Walker has made a point that we may be grateful with the increasing fuel prices for some other alternative to driving cars, and that the foresight that he talks about in getting all this infrastructure in place may actually have some limited benefit. In my view, if you look at the cost of what we have invested in cycleways and the increasing levels of cycleway provision, the benefits are quite limited compared to the extraordinary costs that we've seen and that we continue to see. So I recognise that these cycleways may come into their own at some point, but if you look at the cycleway use numbers, and I keep referring to the graph that DCC data has provided over the last 4 years, showing that there has been no significant increase in cycleway use, and yet we have still incredibly significant investment in cycleways. I have found this to be difficult to justify for a very long time. I hope that we do get some value from it, but as I said before, I don't think it's been anything like used to the extent that we've funded it. Are there any other people wishing to comment? Deputy Mayor Lucas and then Councillor Gary.
Thank you. Just briefly, I'd just like to thank Ms Fraser and the team for the huge work that they've done on these levels of service and thinking about how to report them in a clear and concise way. And I think, as previously been commented, it makes it much easier to read and to understand. And it's good to have in a relatively short period of time. We've got, to review them. Now we're starting to report on them and we can see what works and what doesn't. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to be able to review them. And I just appreciate the work that you've done.
And Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm sure the Chair is grateful for the option to ride his bike, because there's many circumstances when people appreciate that option. I found the levels of service changes useful. I think we've still got a little bit of work to do on some of them in terms of wording, but I know a considerable amount of work went on over an extended period with considerable input from elected members to get to where we are, and staff really pulled out all the stops to get here. I found particularly useful the higher-lower comment, because in some cases a higher graph was a positive and in other cases the lower graph was a positive. So those little notes certainly assisted when you're changing gears throughout the levels of service.
In answer to Councillor Gary, her certainty that I have the option to ride a bike is not the case. That option has always been there. I have an eye condition currently, which means that I'm not able to drive a car, but I have been able to get around town really quite well, as I always have, and have yet to use the cycleway because it's just not anywhere on any of the routes that I go. And I'm not sure that I would anyway, on account of, if you look at the one-way street system, for instance, the intersections that you have to go through as a cyclist with a different kind of turning issue at each intersection would mean that I would tend to avoid them, as most other cyclists seem to. But that's my comment. If there are any others, we can move on now to item 8, which is the financial report. Oops, sorry, forgot to put the motion. All those in favour of noting the results of the half-year levels of service reporting, please say aye. Against? No. Thank you. That's carried. Item 8, financial report, period ended 31st January 2026. We've got Mr. Hayden McAuliffe. Is that a bit better? Sorry, I have trouble with names. And Carolyn Allen, as usual, thank you very much. Have you any preparatory comment on this very fine report of yours?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. We're happy to go straight to questions.
Right. Questions then. Councillor Gary.
Tēnā kōrua, pages 67 and 68, there is the section on the financial impact of the weather event in October 24, and the wind event last year. Can I have your assurance, and thank you for that, I think it's particularly helpful that we're tracking that. Can I have your assurance that we'll continue to do that going forward for major events, and there'll obviously be some subjective decision around what is considered a major event or not, but we're going to see more of them, so it will be good to track that and understand our costs.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we're happy to keep tracking those.
Sorry, pardon me, I've lost my track here. Councillor Chambers.
Yeah, thank you. Just on page 60, in relation to consumable and general costs, the comments at the bottom, towards the bottom of the page, about resource consent expenditure being unfavourable to budget by $322,000, which is quite a lot of money. And we've already discussed this a little bit, I think, in a previous paper. I'm just wondering, I guess this is money going towards consultants. Who are these consultants? Do they tend to be people who used to work for the council, who now do this sort of work?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll take that question. So yeah, it's a mix. So they are effectively external planning consultants that do this work for in and around the city, but also could be others within the Otago region as well. And you point around the 322,000. Absolutely. A lot of that money though is also charged back to the applicant. So you receive a percentage back in through the revenue versus what's being charged in terms of the costs for that outsourced service. It is, however, more expensive to outsource than obviously do it in sourced.
Councillor Lund.
This is for Mr. McLean. Just noting that, as he's noted before, the the waste minimisation, the resource recovery project is delayed. My question is it able to be further delayed without any significant cost if required? Are you delayed further?
I would have to check. We are delivering a program approved by council through the 9-year plan. So if council were of a mind to ask us to delay something for some other reason, that would be up to council. But I'm happy to check the contractual matters that might arise from unexpected delays.
Thank you, and this is for Ms. Nilsson. If she can just briefly advise me what the scope of the work is at the Sargood Centre. Ms. Nilsson not here? No.
Sorry, Councillor Lund, can you just expand on what you mean by scoping?
Just the actual work. The $600,000 is budget to be spent in May this year on the Sargood Centre, and it doesn't appear to be a roof work. I'm just curious to know what the scope of the work is, what it actually is.
Sure. It is roof work.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you. This is a bit of a wishy-wash question. The report shows the net deficit is 5.3 million, which is 9.3 million favourable to the budget, but revenue is still 4.4 million under budget. How much of these favourable results are genuine savings, and how much are simply timing, variance, or delay work? Maybe a percentage? Are we talking 50, 60? Page 54 to 56 is where those numbers came from.
Thank you, Councillor. That we'd have to do analysis on that just to tell you exactly how much of it's falls into each category that you mentioned. But for example, on the revenue, the largest variance there is to do with the subsidies that we get for capital work from NZTA, and that is behind budget because of timing of the projects.
To move on, personnel costs are 2.3 million favourable, mainly because of vacancies, sorry. How is that affecting service delivery in any meaningful way, or is this just a temporary saving? Page 59, I think, is where I got that.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. That is reflecting our savings year to date due to vacancies.
Are we seeing it affect services in any meaningful way?
I'll take that, Councillor. I guess that links back to the previous paper, which is the levels of service. So I guess that's the direct correlation between how much resource have you got versus the services that you want or we can provide. So in some cases, do you provide a Rolls-Royce service or the Toyota Corolla service? So it's the levels of service.
Thank you.
I note on page 58 that there's a suggestion there that Transport NZTA capital subsidy was unfavourable by 4.008 million. And it looked to me initially as though we might have been missing out on some funding, but Mr McLean has advised me that it's fundamentally a timing issue. Perhaps Mr McLean might want to expand on that.
Thanks, Councillor. So the subsidy we get for the work will remain. It relates to things like Albany Street, the Mosgiel Park and Ride, which have moved through timing delays and for various reasons. Some of it's tipped into next year, so we can only invoice NZTA for work that's completed and ongoing. So we'll be invoicing them for that and receiving that subsidy proportionally next year.
And Deputy Mayor Lucas, you had a question.
Thank you. I have several, and I'll just follow up on your comments, Mr McLean, in terms of the delay to Mosgiel Park and Ride. So will that be completed this financial year?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. No, it won't. It was delayed by consent, so work is underway, but it won't be fully complete this financial year.
Okay, thank you. And at some point, maybe you give an indication when it might be complete. And also the Albany Street project, because I know that we made decisions and then unmade and made decisions last year, and I thought the whole intent was that it would be constructed over the summer period. So am I right in reading into this that there's going to be no construction until next financial year?
Thank you. So the timing delay from when Council decided to remove the project to when it was decided to put it back in always meant we were not going to be able to fully complete it this financial year. The work has commenced on Albany Street. So once Council made the decision to put the project back in, we were ready to go to market anyway. And so we did that and talked to the contractors about making the most of the university semester break to get as much done as possible to minimise disruption. But it was that decision delay meant it was always going to be rolling into next year.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of other questions. One is in relation to on page 59 and about the BIS expenditure. It's been quite significantly underspent. Are we going to catch up by year end on that item?
Possibly not, Deputy Mayor. We are doing some work at the minute looking at what the priorities are of BIS in terms of the specific projects that we'd like them to do. So maybe not is the answer to the question.
Thank you. My next question is on the top of page 61, and the commentary on that is about the timing, is about the grants. And I thought that we had approved the grants that needed to be funded in that first half of the year and the rates relief, that we had done all those approvals before 31 December. So I was surprised to see that variance. I'm just concerned that, there's organisations waiting on their funding, and have we paid those out?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The grants have been paid out now for rates relief. They were paid out over the last couple of weeks and have been completed. The budget timing that we had is historically those grants were approved in the first half of the year, and due to some delays with decisions, that has been a bit later than what we expected. So, payments have been made now. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just concerned that whether payments had been made or not. My other question is on page 66, and where it mentions the Tunnels Trail budget is now going to be 400,000 over by year end, which that's the first time we've seen that commentary, and I'm just wondering what suddenly happened in that project that's caused that overspend.
Thanks, I might take that through the chair. Yes, so we didn't accrue the correct amount. So the budget was 1.8 million. Was budgeted last year, and we pulled forward 1.4 million. So the whole project will be delivered for a shade over 1.8. So I'm informed this morning that it's going to be around about $11,000 more than 1.8 million.
That's okay. I was just concerned about why suddenly that had happened. And my last question, if I may, is actually a question that me Sophie would have asked in relation to the Toitu Theaterette. And her question is, will we come in on budget and on that? And then was there a business plan around delivering on that?
So yes, we will come to budget. They were delayed about 4 or 5 weeks because of a earthquake assessment or seismic assessment that was done. We've got that now, so the construction continuing and should be complete in the next 4 to 5 weeks in terms of the construction.
And so that will be open this financial year?
Targeting 1 July, yep.
Mr. Broughton.
Thanks. Just looking at page 56, the overall P&L, just obviously a 9 mil positive variance is favourable and good to see. Just wanted to understand if there's much risk that unwinds over the next 6 months, given it a lot of that gain has been through OPEX savings.
Yes, thank you for the question. There are some areas, for example, in operations and maintenance, that we will catch up the spending, particularly in transport, and we may, depends how the year unfolds in Three Waters, whether we need to spend the reactive maintenance budgets. So at the moment they're favourable. I know in February their particular budget went unfavourable, so there's a lot still up in the air.
Councillor Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Page 66 and 67 is touched on by Councillor Gary, but we appear to be taking a burning cost approach to major weather events. If we are to believe that these events are going to become more common, and you know, I understand the rationale for self-insuring, I guess, but should we move to making a provision annually rather than facing all of the cost when the events occur?
Thank you, Councillor. We have in the past, for example, in transport, had budgets for emergency events, and we never get it right, is what history tells us. In terms of the wind event, we have an insurance claim underway for that. It would just be difficult to know what to budget, but we can certainly be looking at the history as we get more years behind us.
But you could provision and then adjust that provision depending on your experience, could you not? I mean, that's what would normally occur.
Well, we could look at it at our budget time each year and just see whether we should be allowing for something. But as I said, we used to in transport, and we found that was wrong, and so now we're not. We might look at it. Yes.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. That just reminds me of a question around that very point. It's about, is it not, do we have a contingency which we can't determine because we don't know what that's going to be, and it's very erratic, versus building resilience, which is part of what we're doing as we're going forward. Is that not the balancing act that we're involved in right now?
There are a number of factors, and like we also don't know a lot of the flood event for October 24. You know, we had NZTA subsidies, so it's really unknown what we might need to budget.
And Councillor Treadwell.
Tēnā koe Chair, tēnā kōrua. Just further to this point, would these kind of calculations be, I guess, affected by the citywide climate adaptation framework that's being worked on, to your knowledge?
Sorry, could you repeat that question, Councillor?
So there's obviously, we're discussing effectively how we can better prepare for the unknown impact of increasing climate-related events. Would that calculus be helped by the citywide climate adaptation framework?
Thanks. Yes, it will. It's about understanding what the risks are in any given area, and then looking at how we best adapt to that. Just back on the budgeting for emergency events, I'll have to get some advice, but my understanding of the Local Government Act is you can't budget for emergency events. It's essentially banking money, rating for something that may or may not happen. So, but I'm happy I'll take that as an action, but that's my understanding is it's not provided for.
Is there anything provided for, and just to give you a wee bit of background, the Mosgiel residents' complaints about the railway crossing and the queues backing up have been increasing for over quite a period of time now. And I'm wondering, is there any financial contingency that we have in the event that something is decided to do there to actually create a roundabout or do something that is going to help what is becoming a really awkward congestion point?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think probably the best way to answer that is there's going to be a workshop very soon on the Mosgiel transport study, which will look at all of that and how it all works, and then Council will be given the option to throw around ideas about what it might do. But there is, bearing in mind, there's the interplay with NZTA and Kiwi Rail at that precise location. So there are a number of transport pressures in and around Mosgiel. So I think the workshop will be in April, I think, or May. It's coming.
Right. My question really was, we have had a significant underspend in transportation because of a much reduced capital program, almost 30-something% now. And I think 12 million of that, in an answer, was just less spending on transportation. Is there any potential for us to, in the event that we decide we really need to do something with Mosgiel, to actually use that, or do we have any other fund that we could apply to a project, or is it a next year plan, 10-year plan issue?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. We certainly don't have a fund, or Ms. Allen has not told me where it is, to do such things. What I would say about the transport are forecast to be circa $4 million underspent. Part of that's Mosgiel Park and Ride and Albany Street, the majority, and some of it's we haven't needed to spend as much as we had planned on the geobags at St Kilda and St Clair, and that'll be reflected in the draft budgets moving forward. So things even like roundabouts take a fair bit of design, and if we go it alone, it'll take some time to design, but also we don't know whether we'd get any co-funding for it. So certainly it could be something that arises out of the Mosgiel transport study that we might want to look at and start talking to the other parties involved and seek some co-funding.
And that Mosgiel transport study, can you give people generally some idea of when that might come back with a result?
I will confirm it. I know it's May. Yeah, it's going to be updated in the Council Forward Work Programme next week.
So it's coming soon.
Yes, imminent. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Right. Oh, more questions, Councillor Gary.
Mr. McLean, in the report on page 66, just while we're on the resilience question, there's a paragraph there about the Port Chalmers water supply, and it says expenditure was favourable due to a design review resulting in rerouting the pipeline and rephasing the project to deliver a more effective solution following the October 2024 rain event. Is it the case that these are the opportunities? I mean, obviously it was broached and broken during that event, and it was pretty catastrophic. And so you're taking the opportunity to build some resilience in. Would that be true?
Might let Mr. Ward.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Gary. The simple answer is yes.
So another example of that, Mr. McLean, would be when the shared path has been rolled out on the Otago Peninsula, that we've raised the road level to adapt around, provide resilience around sea level rise versus it being eroded away. So there's a resilience measure there. We're building resilience in all sorts of areas, departments of council, are we not?
Yes, we are. And if I can speak for the transport, we've received some Crown resilience funding, which we are doing some work on the Brighton Tidy Mouth Road. Generally, our renewals funding is like for like, so it would have to be a conscious decision of council to budget, if we're going to replace a culvert, if we thought it best to upsize that culvert for resilience purposes, the local share would have to increase, but that's certainly something that we consider.
Thank you.
Right, it seems to be questions. I'd like to move from the chair that we note the financial performance for the period ended 31st January 2026 and the financial position as at that date, seconded Deputy Mayor Lucas. So there's the motion. Your opportunity to comment. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, I'll start. Though this is a financial report, we sort of slightly morphed off, but I just do want to speak to a couple of points that we morphed off into. Firstly to Councillor Gary's point, yes, the resilience that's happening at Port Chalmers is a great example of what we're talking about, and just be made aware that the residents of the West Harbour are living that resilience project at the moment, and we're very grateful for it, but obviously have traffic issues related to SH88 being closed off for about 5 minutes each way, but I will give credit to the workers there who are doing a sterling job. More importantly, I wanted to speak to the Chair's comment around the Mosgiel issue. And I think it's probably that those issues are probably best placed within or asked around the regional land transport plan, and I am the councillor who is the regional land transport representative sitting with multiple agencies. And your question is sage, Mr. Chair, because today, later on, I will be taking Councillor Sims to meet the chair of the Mosgiel Tyree Community Board for a tour of Mosgiel to identify those issues that will sit, for those who are not aware, every 6 years the plan is reviewed, but they have a 3-yearly cycle in there, and that's coming up next year. So it's very important for those major infrastructure projects to get into that plan, and also to be in our 10-year plan that feeds into central government funding. So just it's probably the place where those sort of things sit, and I'm sure it'll be part of our conversation later today, Councillor Sims.
I'm glad that the issue's hanging in the air, because it's been hanging around for quite a long time, and I don't go to Mosgiel every day, but just about probably every month, and it's never got any better, and sometimes the queues have been backing up all the way up State Highway 1. So it would be lovely if you could help move that along.
Thank you for lack of trying.
Councillor Chambers.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, the big message from this financial report is this ongoing sort of underspend in capital expenditure, which is on track to be $41 million by the end of the year. And clearly there's been speculation in the community, in the ODT, for example, that our officials are making some sort of decisions that we are not in control of in achieving this sort of these savings. But I think the report reveals that that's not the case. It's much more complicated. And it's more sort of a combination of timing, actual savings being made on projects, which is good, and just generally sort of having to react to the realities of what's happening. But in this circumstance, perhaps we as governors have to be reassured that throughout the teams across the whole council, there's vigilance that in this sort of atmosphere of not getting work done, vital things aren't being missed out or left behind. Perhaps some sort of process of anybody on the council can put their hand up and say to the boss, "Look, this really needs done," without fear of of criticism for speaking out. I mean, our whole team need to be vigilant that important things are getting done and not being left out.
Yeah, hopefully that is the case, and your comments welcome. But so's your concern, and it's a concern that I've shared for some time as well. We're now looking at, I think it's 35% underspend on capital, as opposed to only 2 years ago, a 25% overspend. this extreme fluctuation is something that makes budgeting look less of a science than perhaps it should be. And I had welcomed the fact that the capital expenditure was considerably less this year, because I don't believe we could afford the program that was budgeted. I voted against a lot of it, but that's my personal view. The point, though, is that if we have a capital project, capital budget that's 35% under budget, we are essentially letting staff decide what that 35% is not spent on. So it's a situation where our ability to decide these things, even if the decisions that have been made have been ones that I didn't favour, is being lost. So hopefully there will be some catch up. As you say, it's a fairly complex issue. The NZTA apparent loss of funding for some things, that was a real concern for me. That has been addressed, and Mr McLean has made clear that that's basically timing issues. So hopefully we are going to get to a situation where the budgets will more accurately reflect what it is that we're actually going to be doing in a year. Councillor Weatherall.
Thank you, Mr Chair. In regards to the current underspend in our capital expenditure, I think this is the remnant of previous councillor decisions fixated on spending. The upside is ratepayers have not had to stump up for the interest payments on the capital expenditure not yet spent. Of course, it would be prudent if council could revisit projects not yet begun, given the probable implementation of rates capping from government. And I'm convinced ratepayers would appreciate us doing so, given the new financial pressures the world is now facing. I must say I'm tired around the narrative that glory projects must continue to get the green light when the word safety is thrown into the mix. I congratulate staff for the cost savings achieved to date delivering its capital projects. I was not the only councillor who had the view a year ago that it was practically going to be an impossibility to deliver the capital program in full, considering its magnitude. Fingers crossed the balance between reality and affordability can be met going forward. Be warned, if councillors don't accept compromise and be reactive to what's happening in the world, many will be looking for new jobs in 2 years' time. Thank you.
But we have two more people wanting to speak, Councillor Treadwell and Councillor Gary.
Sorry, I was just drawing attention to Councillor Gary. So.
Thank you, Mr Chair. If we're paying attention to what's happening in the world, as one of my colleagues just mentioned, then we would all be aware of climate change and its impact. And I was alarmed to hear a colleague say, and I wrote it down, if we are to believe that these events will be more common. Well, I would hope we would believe that, because that's what the scientific evidence suggests. I'm very grateful to staff for tracking the costs of the climate-related events, the rain event in October 2024 and the wind event late last year, because these costs are going to mount. And as we decide on spending going forward into our long-term plan and in our annual plan, we would be wise to take this into account. Building resilience is going to be extremely important. It's going to take courage. Reactive work is going to continue to cost us dearly. And so it is helpful to track this to get the actual costs. But in fact, it doesn't give the whole picture, because there's a much wider cost out there in the community. And our staff who are working with community following these events will know. So thank you to the staff for providing this information. It's going to be extremely important going forward. There's up to $5 million worth here, but it doesn't give the whole picture. And as to the CapEx program, it is clear to me from the comments made that colleagues don't understand fully the need for projects to be on the regional land transport plan, plus a signal from council in the long-term plan to be even able to access funding, even if it's not the subsidy rate, but other funds that occasionally the government puts up. And being election year, that is entirely possible that there may be some funding opportunities there. So we need to be really clear about how the system works, and I would encourage newer colleagues to get their head around that because it is very specific.
Councillor Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sitting here staring at the debt graph on page 81, and I'm encouraged by noticing the flattening of the forecast debt for the DCC from year 2030 onwards. But I think that flattening is only going to occur with a great deal of work by this council and also by our staff over the next few years. It's not just going to happen because we've drawn it. It's only going to happen if we actually start to really make some astute decisions. And I absolutely welcome Councillor Weatherall with his suggestion that the major capital expenditure projects be revisited, not the least looking at national events and global events in recent months. I would like to sincerely acknowledge the efforts of the staff led by Miss Allen towards opening up the discussions for how this council might start to reduce operational expense and also reconsider its capital expense. And the thing that's made me most angry in this triennium so far have been comments from by-election candidates portraying that as a mayor's secret committee. That was not how it was set up. It was not the intent, and the intent was nothing other than good common sense. And I think that the ratepayers should take a great deal of comfort from the fact that these conversations and processes are underway. So. Yeah, with that, my point remains that to flatten that graph, we're going to have to do some hard work. Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you. This is good work by the staff. The headline result is encouraging, but I think we should be clear-eyed about what sits beneath it. It's a good share of a favourable result is coming from timing, variances or delayed work rather than true savings. Then we should be careful not to overstate how strong the position really is. Delaying work does not always save money. Sometimes it just shifts the bill down to the future, into the future. I also do not want us to save money today in ways that leave us less able to invest in resilience and climate change. Thank you.
Looks like I might get the last word. Councillor Sims, flattening of the graph. I'm glad that you find some comfort in it. I don't. I've been here maybe too long now, but long enough to be able to know that every year, for all the 18 years I've been here, graphs have been put up showing your typical umbrella graph, where, oh yes, costs are rising in the short term, but over time they're going to come down again. And as a previous Chief Financial Officer, Riley pointed out, that umbrella keeps moving forward. The debts have not gone down, ever. The costs have not gone down, ever. The budgeting for out years have always been optimistic. And my real worry is that the flattening debt graph, the flattening is happening in the outer years, and that budgeting in the outer years is optimistic, and the further out it gets, the more questionable the assumptions behind it are. I don't believe that the flattening of the debt graph is really anything to take comfort in. when we should be looking at a debt graph that actually has a reduction in debt for both the companies and for the council. The debt graph is, I believe now, more honest than it was in the past. I believe that our assumptions are more sound, and that is probably the reason why the debt graph is flat, rather than the traditional umbrella of it going down in the outer years has been. But having said that, the really big issue for me isn't the climate change events that are coming. It isn't even the geopolitical situation, which is certainly going to add significant costs to infrastructure and to supply chain disruption. For me, we are looking at the out years of the 9-year plan costing us, the DCC, $1 million every week just in interest. Our DCC-owned companies have almost the identical problem. $1 billion debt plus, and very, very subject to interest rate costs. If the geopolitical situation creates a situation in which we get a significant interest rate increase, our extreme vulnerability will be absolutely available, will be absolutely obvious to everybody, and I think will eclipse any of the other concerns that we have had around this table. So on that happy and positive note, I would like to, have I moved this motion already? I've moved, it's been seconded by Deputy Mayor Lucas. I'd like to ask everybody to agree, aye, that the motion is to pass. Everyone say aye. Or any against? Anybody want to vote against that we note this performance financials? I declare that motion carried. And that brings us to consideration of items by the chair. Is there anything that anyone here would like me to consider? As chair or anything else? Feel free. All good? In that case, I'd like to declare the meeting closed and thank everybody very much. Except for the confidential, which we will go into in 5 minutes. Seconded. Deputy Mayor. All those in favour, thank you. Looking forward to seeing you in confidential in 5 minutes' time.